The South Side of Chicago raised women like Alexia Carson to walk with, their heads high, even when the world tried to lower their chin. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. At 28, Alexia was a literacy coordinator at Roseland Academy, a public school buried deep in a zip code most donors ignored. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a room full of chaos and have kids quiet within minutes, not with volume, but with grace. Her presence was calm, assured. Her hair was always in a soft bun or twist out. No makeup, no loud nails. Just clear eyes, a soft smile, and the same cross necklace her aunt had given her on her 18th birthday. She didn't have Instagram filters or designer clothes, but she had purpose, and it radiated. Every morning started the same: black coffee, a whispered prayer, one last peek at the sticky notes lining her mirror. You are not disposable. Don't shrink. Love doesn't hide. She'd written those during college, before heartbreaks, before burnouts, before life hardened certain edges. That Wednesday morning, the school buzzed. A guest speaker from a major tech firm was scheduled to visit. The staffroom rumor was, it was someone big, a CEO, a rich donor. Alexia didn't care. The reading intervention program needed funding, but she wasn't one to chase power. She had books to shelve and lesson plans to revise. So when the man in a black turtleneck and dark jeans walked into the 5th grade, reading circle, and leaned silently against the bookshelf, she barely noticed him. He wasn't flashy, no camera crew, no forced grin. He watched quietly as she got the kids engaged. You're not wrong, Malik. The author is using foreshadowing. Look at the way she hints that the storm's coming, even though the sky is still clear. That's writing with intention. The man's brow lifted slightly. After the session, as the kids returned to their classrooms, the principal introduced the guest. Mr. Brandon Ellis, she said with a wide smile. Founder and CEO of Ellis Innovations. Alexia blinked. She recognized the name. Everyone did. Brandon Ellis was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country, tech genius, creator of a software suite that powered everything from banks to public libraries. Forbes cover, Wall Street darling. He didn't look the part. No Rolex, no bravado, just piercing grey eyes and a stillness that most men didn't carry. Impressive work, he said softly, approaching her after the tour ended. I wasn't performing, she replied without flinching. I know. That's why it was impressive. He asked if she had time for a quick coffee nearby. She hesitated, then nodded. That's how it started. At the cafe, Brandon said little. He asked questions, listened more than he spoke. He didn't fidget with his phone. He didn't interrupt. I don't get to see people doing real work often, he said. What do you do then? Move numbers around, build systems, watch others scale them. She sipped her tea. Well, in this part of town, systems don't save children. People do. He didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled. Small, real. Can I see you again? Alexia blinked. Like, at the school? No. Like Friday. Dinner? She agreed, cautiously. Not because he was a billionaire, but because something about his energy didn't feel like a game. Their first dinner was quiet. No press. No paparazzi. Just a small bistro on 73rd and Stony Island. He wore the same turtleneck. She wore a long-sleeve dress and flat shoes. They talked about books, about code, about loneliness. He'd grown up in New York, mostly in boarding schools, raised by nannies, while his mother focused on social climbing. He never knew his father. He built Ellis Innovations in his 20s. It made him rich, but not happy. I don't like the noise that comes with money, he said, but I'm too deep in now. Money's not evil, Alexia replied. It just amplifies who someone already is. He looked at her, long and hard. Who do you think I am? Still figuring it out, she said, not smiling. He liked that she didn't chase him, that she didn't laugh when he said something just to fill silence. She liked that he didn't pressure her, that he wasn't trying to perform. By their 5th date, he was showing up at her apartment with flowers and groceries. He cooked, badly, She laughed and taught him how to season food without measuring cups. By their 3rd month, he said, "I like the quiet with you." So did she. 6 months later, they stood in front of a courthouse clerk with no friends, no family, no frills. Brandon didn't want headlines. Alexia didn't want pressure. He gave her a ring simple and elegant, a rose gold band with a single stone. She wore it without fuss. That night, they had dinner in his estate north of the city. Marble floors, glass windows, silence. Still, Alexia smiled. She thought, maybe this can work. She didn't expect Nellie Ellis to walk in unannounced. "Oh," Nellie said with a frozen smile. "So this is the new Mrs. Ellis." Alexia extended her hand. Nellie pretended not to see it. Brandon didn't say a word. That was the first red flag. She let it slide. She believed in patience, in building trust over time. She told herself love could overcome silence. She moved into his estate, learned its cold halls, decorated her office in soft pinks and golds. She kept her job at Roseland, at least part-time. Brandon said he respected that. Still, Nellie visited often, always unannounced, always sharp with her compliments. "You've done well for a public school girl," she once said. "Thank you," Alexia replied. "We build strong from the ground up." Brandon heard it, said nothing. Each time, Alexia tucked the hurt deeper. But the quiet between them wasn't the peaceful kind anymore. It was the sound of two people slowly drifting apart while pretending everything was fine. The first time Alexia sat in the Ellis family dining room, she counted 10 empty chairs. It wasn't Thanksgiving. It wasn't a party. It was just a Tuesday night. And still, the table looked like a museum exhibit. She sat across from Brandon, who scrolled through emails on his phone while she picked at her grilled salmon. The chef, a polite man named Gene, stood nearby as if waiting for judgment. "Tell him it's great," Alexia whispered. Brandon looked up. "Oh, yes, it's good, Gene." "Thanks." Gene nodded and disappeared. Silence returned. In the early days of their marriage, Alexia tried to tell herself that Brandon was just adjusting, that maybe he wasn't used to conversation over dinner, that maybe quietness was just his way of processing. But days turned into weeks, and the silence never changed. She left notes on his desk, short things like, "Don't forget to eat lunch," or "I made banana bread. It's in the kitchen." Sometimes he'd reply by text, "Thanks, got it, busy." Later, other times, nothing. She still worked part-time at Roseland. She needed it. The school gave her meaning. Her girls at the Ridding Club would shout her name and hug her legs every Tuesday. "You look tired, Miss Carson," one of them said once. "I just didn't sleep well," she answered. "Is it because you're rich now?" Alexia chuckled. "Baby, tired don't care how much money you have." Brandon asked her to join his company's education division on a consulting basis. "Your insights could help design the next learning module," he told her over breakfast. That day, he actually cooked eggs and toast. It was burnt, but the gesture meant more than the food. She agreed, hopeful. Maybe this would bring them closer. She spent hours at the company headquarters, reviewing interface flows, reading reports, and offering feedback. She had a gift for making things more human. Still, Brandon didn't talk much, not even at work. He didn't ask about her input in meetings. He didn't walk her out when she stayed late. And every day she returned to their mansion, stepped into the elevator alone, and rode up to a space too clean, too quiet, and too cold to feel like home. One night, she stood in the hallway outside Brandon's office and just listened. He was laughing on the phone, a deep, warm laugh she hadn't heard in months. When he ended the call and noticed her, the laugh disappeared. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded, though everything inside her said no. Nellie became a fixture. She'd stop by under the pretense of checking in, but always left pieces of herself behind. A scarf draped over, the couch, a bottle of perfume in the guest bathroom, opinions planted like traps in the middle of conversations. "You're very poised, Alexia." "That's unexpected, considering your background." Brandon sat 2 feet away. He didn't flinch. He didn't defend. Alexia smiled, tight-lipped. Poise doesn't belong to the wealthy. Some of us were raised right even without silver spoons. Nellie raised a brow. So you're not ashamed of where you come from? Why should I be? I come from people who worked for everything they had, with love, with God, with backbone. Brandon sipped his drink, not one word in her defense. That night, as they lay in bed with backs turned toward each other, Alexia whispered, "Do you ever plan to stand up for me?" Silence. She turned to face him. "I don't need you to fight my battles, but your silence tells her it's okay to disrespect me. And that hurts." Brandon sighed, but didn't roll over. "I don't like conflict, Alexia. You don't have to like it. You just have to love me enough to make it worth it." She wanted to believe things could change. That somewhere beneath Brandon's silence was the man who once read quietly in her classroom and asked real questions. But he had become a stranger in tailored suits. Their conversations were mostly about logistics, work, bills, appearances, never dreams, never fears, never joy. A month later, she missed her period. She took the test in the upstairs bathroom, the one with pale yellow tiles and a window that overlooked the garden. It read, "Pregnant." She stared at it for a full 5 minutes. Then another 5. Her first thought wasn't joy. It was fear. How do you raise a child in a home where silence is louder than any fight? She didn't tell Brandon for 2 days. When she did, he was standing in the kitchen with a glass of scotch. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice calm. Brandon blinked. "How far along?" "About 6 weeks. A pause. "Okay." That was it. No smile, no hug, no excitement, just okay. Alexia went to her first appointment alone. The nurse, sweet and wide-eyed, asked, "Is your partner parking the car?" Alexia smiled faintly. "No. He's at work." The technician turned the monitor so she could see the flicker of a heartbeat. She cried quietly as Ava appeared for the first time. Tiny, perfect, alive. She took a picture of the screen and texted it to Brandon. No reply. During her second trimester, she nearly fainted while walking into the lobby of Ellis Innovations. A young intern ran to catch her. She was fine, just dehydrated. That night, Brandon said, "You should work less, maybe take it easy." She looked at him across the dinner table. "I'm already doing all of this alone. Working keeps me sane." He nodded, but said nothing else. Nellie's comments got sharper. "You're showing faster than I expected. Are you sure you're not further along? You don't want to lose your figure. Men don't stay for long if things change too much. I hope you're planning to hire a nanny. You'll never keep Brandon's attention if you're sleep-deprived and sagging." Alexia stopped replying. She stopped defending herself. She just folded Ava's onesies in the nursery and put her faith in the baby kicking inside her, the only consistent presence in her life. At night, she whispered to her belly, "It's you and me now." She wanted to believe Brandon would come around, that when he held their child, something would awaken in him. That love would replace indifference. That fear would melt into joy. But deep down, she was preparing for a different kind of motherhood. Brandon started sleeping in his home office more often. "Work deadlines," he said. She stopped asking questions. She started nesting. She attended birthing classes alone, decorated the nursery alone. She picked the name Ava Hope without consulting him, because he didn't ask. She was 7 months along when she overheard Nellie again. This time, Brandon was actually replying. "You think I planned this?" he said. "I tried to be careful. Nellie, she's using that baby to lock you down." "Brandon, I know." "Nellie, it's not too late to pull back. You don't have to pretend anymore." Alexia stood outside the door, her hands shaking, her heart splitting. She walked away before hearing more. That night, she slept on the nursery floor. She stopped trying to be seen. She stopped trying to force a family. She poured all her energy into preparing for Ava. Brandon didn't notice she stopped texting, didn't notice she didn't eat dinner with him anymore, didn't notice she was shrinking quietly, like a flame without air. And then, one quiet night, As she folded tiny socks and tried not to cry, her water broke, and nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The marble tiles were polished to perfection, but they didn't reflect anything warm. Alexia stood barefoot in the nursery, watching a small puddle form beneath her. Her body ached, her fingers trembled, and she clutched her belly as Ava shifted inside her. She looked at the baby monitor on the wall, a gift she'd ordered last week. Brandon hadn't noticed the package. She tried to breathe. Another contraction hit. Sharp, clean, inevitable. She reached for her phone and texted the only person who should have cared. Alexia. Water broke. Heading to Memorial. She stared at the screen, hoping the typing bubbles would appear. They didn't. She bent slowly, grabbed her hospital bag, and limped down the grand staircase. Each step felt longer than the last. No one met her at the bottom. No footsteps. No door opening. Just the silence she'd grown used to. Cold and untouched. She hailed a cab. The driver didn't ask questions, just turned on the hazard lights and drove fast. Alexia looked out the window, one hand on her belly, whispering, "Hold on, baby girl. We're almost there." Then her phone buzzed. One message. From Brandon. "Brandon, you need to decide. Me or the baby. I'm done pretending this is what I wanted." She read it once, twice, 3 times. The world slowed. She clutched her belly harder. Her breathing faltered. The driver glanced at her in the mirror. "Ma'am? You good?" She nodded, numb. "No follow-up?" she whispered. There was none. "No, I'm scared. No, I'm sorry. No, I didn't mean that." Just a single line that made it clear. He'd chosen himself. So she whispered back, "Then I choose her." At Memorial Women's Hospital, the nurses moved fast. Alexia was wheeled in on a gurney, eyes glassy but voice steady. She answered every question. "Name?" "Alexia Carson Ellis." "First child?" "Yes." "Support person with you?" "No." They didn't ask more. They just worked. Inside the delivery suite, Dr. Marisol Trent, her OB, met her with gentle eyes and sharp focus. "I've reviewed your chart, Alexia. Baby's measuring small but healthy, but her heart rate is fluctuating." Alexia nodded. "Do what you need to do." Marisol blinked. "You're sure? Caesarean isn't light." "I'm sure." The lights blurred as they prepped her. A nurse wiped her forehead. Another took her hand. She stared at the ceiling as they cut. Not a single tear escaped her eyes until the cry came. Soft, high-pitched, fragile. Ava Hope Ellis. 4:08 a.m. 5 pounds, 2 ounces, breathing. Alive. Alexia didn't speak. She didn't ask for Brandon. She simply reached for her daughter and held her close. The first 24 hours passed in a haze. Painkillers kept her from moving much. Nurses checked her vitals. Ava stayed in the bassinet next to her, swaddled tightly, eyes closed. Each time the door opened, Alexia hoped, just a little, that Brandon would walk through. He didn't. No flowers, no calls, no publicist with a fake apology, no assistant with an excuse, only the smell of baby powder and antiseptic, and the weight of her own breath. On the second night, the room was dim. Alexia cradled Ava, humming a song her aunt used to sing during thunder. "You'll never beg for love, baby girl. Not like I did." That's when a quiet knock came. It was Imani Cole, the night shift nurse. Young with deep brown skin and almond eyes, she carried a bottle of warm water and a soft smile. "Just came to check on you," she said. "Can I hold her?" Alexia nodded. Imani lifted Ava gently and sat in the chair beside the bed. "She's strong," Imani whispered. "Small but strong." Alexia looked at her hands. "She has to be." They sat in silence for a few moments. Then Imani said softly, "You're not the first woman to choose her child over a man's ego, but you might be one of the strongest I've seen." Alexia blinked. That sentence pierced her more than Brandon's text. She didn't cry, but something shifted in her spine. A quiet, burning clarity. Imani placed Ava back in the bassinet, checked the monitors, and gave her one last look. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow's the first day of everything. Then she left. Alexia didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, one hand over her scar, the other on the bed rail. She thought about her aunt and uncle, how they worked double shifts and still came home smiling. She thought about her students, how they needed someone to believe in them when no one else did. She thought about Nellie and the way women like her used silence as a weapon. And she thought about Brandon, the man who had once watched her read to children like it was holy. Now a ghost in a glass tower. She closed her eyes and made a promise. The next morning, a caseworker came by to confirm insurance details. The staff asked again if she had anyone to discharge her. She shook her head. No one's coming. They offered a social worker. She declined. Imani came by one last time before her shift ended. She left a small card on the nightstand. If you ever need anything, she said, for real. It had a handwritten number and 3 words. You are seen. Alexia held Ava tighter, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. She left the hospital wearing sweatpants and a button-up she barely fit into. No limo, no driver. The driver didn't stare when she struggled to buckle Ava's car seat. He simply waited. The city passed by in quiet blur. Murals, brick buildings, buses, corner stores. She didn't go back to the mansion. She couldn't. Instead, she had a key in her pocket to a 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of South Shore. She'd signed the lease from her hospital bed, using a deposit scraped together from her savings account. It wasn't much, but it had a crib, a mattress on the floor, and curtains she'd sewn herself. She stepped inside, breathing deep. The floor creaked, the fridge buzzed, and Ava stirred. Alexia whispered, "Welcome home, baby." Alexia laid Ava in her crib for the first time that evening. The apartment wasn't much, 2nd floor, no elevator, paint peeling near the windows, but it was hers. No cameras, no gates, no mansion full of people pretending they didn't hear her cry. Just the quiet hum of a tired fridge, the soft whimper of her newborn daughter, and the constant ache from her healing incision. She leaned against the doorframe of the nursery and exhaled. Her body was exhausted, but her soul felt lighter. The mattress on the floor doubled as her couch and bed. She curled into it that night, pillows behind her back, Ava in a bassinet beside her, and silence pressing in. Not the same silence from Brandon's estate. This silence wasn't cold. This silence was honest. It was the sound of starting over. She scrolled through her phone. Brandon hadn't sent a single message. No one from his team, not even Nellie. The last thing he ever said to her was still sitting in her inbox. Me or the baby. She could have deleted it, blocked the number, but she didn't. She needed to remember that pain had taught her something, that love without commitment was cruelty in disguise. The next morning, she made coffee on the stovetop. Half the cabinets were still empty. The single curtain rod hung crooked. The kitchen light flickered if you opened the fridge too hard. She didn't care. She was building. Ava slept most of the day, waking only to feed or cry. Alexia moved carefully. Her scar ached with every step, but she embraced it. "I brought life into the world," she whispered. "That ache is proof." She made a list on a torn notepad. And file for WIC. Check public library's story hour schedule. And email Mrs. Lane about the reading donation from Roseland. And post Ava's announcement to family-only Facebook group. She paused at the last one. Her aunt and uncle had messaged a few days ago, asking about her. She hadn't replied yet. They'd always been supportive, but she didn't know how to explain this life, this broken fairy tale she never expected to live in. She took a breath, opened Messenger, and sent a photo of Ava. "Her name is Ava Hope. She saved me. I'm okay now. No filter. No edits. Just truth." Over the next few weeks, Alexia moved on instinct. She woke every 2 hours to nurse. She watched old PBS shows to calm Ava. She did breathing exercises at the window when the loneliness hit too hard. She borrowed a used baby carrier from a neighbor downstairs. Her name was Miss Evelyn, mid-50s, soft-spoken, and curious in a respectful way. "You from around here?" she asked one morning as they crossed paths at the mailbox. Not anymore, Alexia replied with a smile. Miss Evelyn nodded slowly. You got a good head on your shoulders, I can tell. Alexia wasn't sure how she knew that. Maybe it was the way she held Ava, or the way she spoke, or the way she didn't shrink even though her life had fallen apart in silence. One night, as Ava nursed in her lap, Alexia pulled out her laptop. It was old and slow. It had belonged to one of her students' parents who donated it to her before she left Roseland. She opened a blank document and titled it, The Hope Room Vision Plan. She didn't know where the idea came from. Maybe it was the nurse's words at the hospital. Maybe it was the quiet ache in her chest. Maybe it was just time. She wanted to create something for women like her. Mothers who had been pushed out, cast aside, left to raise the next generation alone, confused, ashamed, or silenced. She began typing. We need a space where motherhood isn't judged, but honored. A place where you don't have to explain why he left or how you'll survive. Just books, care, dignity, and quiet strength. She didn't know what it would become, but she was planting the seed. Days turned into weeks. She made formula from donated cans at the women's clinic. She swaddled Ava like a pro. She relearned her body, every scar, every sag, every shift. And she forgave herself for once believing that silence was love. One morning, a letter came in the mail. It was from Ellis Legal, a formal notice requesting her signature to initiate a post-nup review. Brandon still hadn't reached out. No. How is Ava? No, I hope you're safe. Just paper. Just more silence disguised as power. She stared at the envelope for 5 full minutes, then set it aside and picked up Ava. You will never think this is normal, she whispered into her daughter's soft hair. You will never learn that love ignores you. She contacted a local community non-profit about space for small gatherings. She posted in a neighborhood forum asking for gently used books. She emailed a few of her old co-workers and explained her plan, free literacy circles for single mothers and their children. It didn't take long. People began replying. One woman offered folding chairs. Another offered snacks. And one of her former Roseland parents sent a message that read, If you're doing this, I'm in. I needed something like this when I had my first. You're not alone. The Hope Room didn't start with a ribbon-cutting ceremony. It started on a Wednesday afternoon in the back room of a church basement where 7 women gathered with kids on their laps, juice boxes on a folding table, and a circle of hand-me-down books spread on the floor. Alexia stood in the middle, Ava strapped to her chest. She cleared her throat. I'm not here to fix you, she said. I'm here because I've been where you are. The room went silent. I'm not special. I'm just a woman who realized my child deserved better than the silence I was living in. A few nodded. One cried. They read together that day. They talked. They breathed. And something real was born. Alexia knew now she didn't have to go back to the mansion. She didn't have to explain herself. She didn't need Brandon to validate Ava's life. Because the moment he asked her to choose, he lost the right to witness what she built after. She was no longer afraid of starting over. She had already done it, with no witnesses, no backup, and no regret. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself after someone walked away? Have you ever been forced to choose your peace over someone else's pride? If you felt Alexia's journey in your heart, drop a comment. Tell us, what moment made you say that's enough? Your story may give someone the courage to start over too. Like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, because here we tell the truth with heart. The nursery walls were a soft sage green. Alexia had chosen the color herself, brushing each stroke in silence late into the evenings. It was peaceful, gentle, the kind of green that whispered instead of shouted. But the room stayed empty most days, not because she wasn't excited to meet her baby, but because Brandon never stepped inside it. Back when she first told him she was pregnant, she still believed things would change. He had blinked at her announcement like it was a random news update. How far along? He'd asked. 6 weeks. Okay, not wow, not come here, Not even a single question about how she felt. Just okay. After that, everything felt like she was walking through water. She tried to get him interested. She printed the ultrasound photo and left it on his desk. He didn't mention it. She made a list of baby names, left it beside his breakfast. He never picked a single one. She asked him to join her at her 12-week appointment. "I've got a call that morning," he replied, without looking up from his tablet. The next day, he flew out for a summit in Boston. He didn't check in, didn't ask how it went. She'd heard stories about disconnected husbands before. But this was different. This wasn't fear or nervousness. This was apathy. At the clinic, the nurse had smiled warmly as Alexia lay back on the exam table. "Ready to meet your little one?" She nodded, clutching her necklace. The monitor beeped, and there Ava was. Tiny, moving, alive, a flickering heartbeat on the screen, fragile but steady. Tears filled her eyes. She didn't even realize she was holding her breath. The nurse handed her a printed photo. "You'll want to show this off." Alexia smiled, then folded the paper and placed it in her purse. Show it to who? The further her pregnancy progressed, the more Brandon withdrew. He worked later, slept in the guest room often, claimed stress, deadlines, investors. She stopped trying to force closeness. Instead, she poured her energy into preparing for Ava. She found online birthing classes and bookmarked them. She researched natural diaper creams and sleep schedules. She visited second-hand shops for maternity clothes because she didn't want to ask Brandon for money. He never offered. She still had a little savings left from her time at Roseland. She guarded it like treasure. She noticed something else too. Nellie's visits increased. Sometimes Brandon wasn't even home when his mother arrived. She had her own key, which Alexia found out the hard way. One afternoon, Alexia came downstairs and found Nellie in the living room flipping through one of her parenting books. "Light reading?" Nellie asked with a tight smile. "It's research," Alexia replied. "I like to be informed." Nellie laughed quietly. "Pen books won't help you hold on to a man." Alexia raised an eyebrow. "Neither will disrespect." The air crackled for a moment, but Nellie didn't flinch. She set the book down and looked at Alexia's belly. "You've gained weight fast." Alexia didn't answer. "You know, a baby changes a man. Sometimes not for the better." Alexia walked away. She had learned one thing very clearly. Nellie never said anything by accident. Every word was calculated, planted. She'd grown up around women like her. The difference was, she didn't need to win the argument. She just needed to protect her child. Her body ached constantly now. Sleep was patchy. Cravings came and went. But the thing that hurt the most was the silence that sat beside her every evening. Brandon still hadn't touched her belly. Not once. Not when she told him Ava kicked. Not when she showed him the 3D scan. Not even when she stood in front of the mirror with a swollen stomach that clearly screamed, "There's life inside me." She once caught him in the hallway scrolling through photos on his phone. He was smiling. It wasn't a photo of her. One rainy night, she decided to try again. She made his favorite meal, grilled salmon with roasted sweet potatoes. She dimmed the lights, wore a maternity dress that hugged her curves just right, and waited. Brandon arrived 2 hours late, already on a call. She served him a plate anyway. He ate in silence. When he finished, he rinsed his dish and placed it in the sink. "Thanks," he said. "I've got a few emails to wrap up." "Brandon," she said, standing behind him. He turned halfway, but didn't fully face her. "I'm scared," she said quietly. He blinked. "Of what?" "Of doing this alone." A pause. "You won't be alone," he said flatly. "You'll have the baby." She stared at him, stunned. "That's not the same, and you know it." He looked past her. "I'm doing the best I can." "No, Brandon," she whispered. "You're doing the bare minimum and calling it effort." He walked away. She didn't follow. The next morning, she stayed in bed long after he left. She watched Ava move beneath her skin. Small flutters. Stronger now. Confident. "She deserves more than this," Alexia whispered. "And so do I." Later that week, she found herself folding the same pile of onesies over and over again, organizing diapers by size, sorting toys she hadn't even unwrapped yet. It wasn't nesting, it was survival. Every little task was a distraction from the fact that she hadn't heard "I love you" in months, that her husband hadn't even picked a name, that the baby kicking inside her was more connected to her than the man who helped create her. Alexia sat on the edge of the nursery rocking chair and spoke aloud for the first time in weeks. "I don't want to raise you in a home where love is silent," Ava kicked. "I want you to know joy, softness, laughter, not tension." Another kick. "You're not here to save a marriage. You're here to save me." She looked at the crib, still unassembled, then at the tiny bookshelf filled with baby books, then at the ultrasound photo framed on the wall. She nodded slowly. It was time to stop waiting for Brandon to show up. He wasn't coming. That night, her back spasmed sharply. She thought it was another false alarm, but the pain grew sharper, more rhythmic. She checked the time. 2:37 a.m. Water everywhere. And Brandon? Absent. Again. The pain started low in her back, like a deep stretch that wouldn't ease up. Alexia gripped the crib rail with both hands, holding herself steady. She looked down. Water was pooling at her feet. Her breath caught. It was happening. Not a false alarm, not another cramp. Real labor. She grabbed her phone with trembling fingers. Her hospital bag was already packed, tucked neatly by the door for weeks. She'd hoped Brandon would carry it when the time came. But she was alone. So she sent a message. Water broke. Heading to Memorial. Sent. She waited a moment, staring at the screen. No typing bubble. No response. She hobbled to the door, each step heavy with pressure and pain. She locked the apartment, slowly made it down the stairs, and hailed a cab. The driver noticed her holding her belly and jumped out to help. "You okay, ma'am?" "Hospital. Please," she said through gritted teeth. He opened the back door. "We'll get you there." The streets blurred by. Rain dotted the window. Streetlights stretched into streaks of yellow and white. Her phone vibrated. She reached for it. A message from Brandon. Her heart thudded in her chest. But the words stopped everything. "You need to decide. Me or the baby. I'm done pretending this is what I wanted." She froze. Her lungs forgot how to breathe. Time didn't slow down. It collapsed. The contraction that hit next nearly made her cry out. The driver looked up again. "Ma'am?" She blinked. Just drive." She read the message again. He had waited until her body was ripping open. To abandon her. There was no doubt left. No grey area. No confusion. That was his truth. And now, she had to answer it with hers. She pressed her hand to her stomach, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Then I choose her." At Memorial Women's Hospital, the lights were too bright. The intake nurse asked the usual questions. She signed paperwork with shaking hands. "Support person?" the nurse asked. Alexia shook her head. "Just me." The nurse softened. "We've got you." They wheeled her in. Her contractions were stronger now, closer together. Her entire back throbbed. Her legs were jelly. She was drenched in sweat before she even made it into triage. Dr. Marisol Trent, her obstetrician, entered moments later, fully awake despite the hour. "Alexia," she said gently, "baby's heart rate is inconsistent. We may not have time for natural labor." Alexia nodded. "No arguments?" "Doctor?" Trent asked. "None," Alexia said, gripping the bed rail. "Do what you need to save her." The operating room was a blur of lights and hands and sterile sounds. They numbed her from the chest down. Drapes covered her lower body. She felt pressure, pulling, shifting, but no pain. She stared at the ceiling, too exhausted to cry, too alert to sleep. She thought of Brandon's message, of every appointment he missed, every belly kick he ignored, every room he walked past with his eyes and heart shut. She thought of Nellie's smirk, her quiet insults, the way Brandon never once stood between them. She thought of Ava, and her grip on the moment changed. She clenched her jaw. She wouldn't let this be her breaking point. This was her turning point. 4:08 a.m. A baby's cry pierced the air. Sharp, real, alive. A nurse brought her closer. "She's perfect," someone whispered. Alexia looked at her. Tiny fists, soft lashes, wrinkled forehead, brown skin, her nose. She reached out and touched her daughter's cheek. A single tear slid down her face. But it wasn't sadness. It was release. Back in recovery, Ava lay in the bassinet beside her. Her chest rose and fell. The monitor beeped slowly. A nurse tucked extra blankets around them both. Still no message from Brandon. Still no knock on the door. Just silence. But this time, it didn't hurt. It confirmed everything she already knew. By midday, the hospital room was filled with polite chaos. Nurses checking vitals, changing pads, offering water, adjusting Ava's blanket. But there were no visitors, no flowers, no texts, no calls. Alexia didn't ask for any. She didn't expect any. Instead, she watched Ava sleep and whispered prayers over her. Later that night, the room grew quiet. Just the hum of machines and the soft rustle of a blanket being moved. That's when Imani Cole, a night shift nurse, returned. She had cocoa-colored skin, a thick braid down her back, and a patient presence. She checked Ava's chart, adjusted a monitor, and glanced at Alexia. "You okay?" Alexia nodded. But Imani didn't leave. Instead, she pulled up the guest chair and sat beside her. "You did this on your own," she said. Alexia looked down. "I had no choice." "Maybe not. But you still showed up." "Not everyone does." Alexia said nothing. Imani stood, brushed off her scrubs, and said quietly, "You're not the first woman to choose her child over a man's ego, but you might be one of the strongest I've seen." Then she left. Alexia stared at the ceiling again, Ava resting on her chest. She wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come, not because she didn't hurt, but because she'd already bled enough for one lifetime. Now, she would heal. The next morning, the doctor confirmed she could be discharged in 2 days. No complications, just routine healing. She nodded. She had nowhere to go. The thought used to scare her. Now, it focused her. She'd figure it out. For Ava. For herself. The nurse came in with paperwork and asked again, "Will anyone be picking you up?" Alexia shook her head. "I'll call a cab." "You sure?" "Yes." Later, a social worker stopped by to offer transitional housing contacts. Alexia took the pamphlet, but deep down, she already had a plan. She had her emergency savings, a friend from Roseland who owed her a favor, a rundown studio on South Shore she could probably lease with one check and a security deposit. It wouldn't be much, but it would be hers, and it would be enough. That night, she lay awake next to Ava and texted one last message to herself in her notes app. "You may not have been enough for him, but you are everything she needs. Let that be your reason to rise." The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and baby powder. The curtains were thin, letting in a dim morning light that painted the walls a tired yellow. Alexia sat up slowly, one hand clutching her abdomen as the other pulled Ava's bassinet closer. Every movement reminded her of the C-section scar, tender and raw. But none of that compared to the wound left by Brandon's message. "You need to decide, me or the baby." That was the last thing he ever said to her. It had been 3 days since she gave birth. Still no call, no visitor, not even a shallow "hope you're okay" from his assistant. The silence spoke louder than any lawyer ever could. Alexia had read that giving birth made a woman feel vulnerable, sometimes depressed, but she didn't feel broken. She felt sharpened. Every cry from Ava, every feeding, every diaper change, it all reminded her she was strong. She wasn't surviving out of stubbornness. She was surviving for Ava. Because if Brandon's silence had taught her anything, it was this. The absence of love is not the absence of responsibility. A nurse came in to check Ava's vitals. Another brought Alexia a fresh robe. Everyone was kind but moved with routine. She was just another mother, another chart, another recovery case, and that was fine. She didn't need attention. She just needed to get out. She stared at her phone for a long time that morning, not to reach out, but to read his message again, to remind herself that she hadn't imagined it. Me or the baby. There was no follow-up, no apology, no, I didn't mean that, no panic, no regret. She thought, what kind of man sends that to his wife while she's in labor? But she knew the answer. A man who never wanted the child. A man who only saw her as a placeholder until the next model arrived. She locked the screen and set the phone face down. That afternoon, a volunteer from the hospital's charity wing arrived. Her name was Mrs. Carver, warm, grey-haired, glasses sliding down her nose. She placed a floral blanket, a bag of newborn clothes, and a card on the table. "These are from the Heart Mothers Fund," she said. "We support new moms with no emergency contacts listed. You qualify." Alexia didn't argue. She smiled politely. Mrs. Carver adjusted the blanket on Ava and looked up. "You're doing better than most," she said softly. "You've got a strong heart." Alexia smiled again, but inside, she felt like that heart had been burned and remade in the fire. That evening, the nurse came to help her take a slow walk down the hallway. Healing took time, they said. Movement helped prevent clotting. Alexia agreed. She just needed to stretch her legs. She moved slowly, one hand on the wall, the other on the IV pole. Every step pulled at her midsection, but she kept going. There were other mothers in the hallway, some holding their babies, some with partners holding their hands. She saw a woman crying into her husband's chest, another laughing as her boyfriend struggled to swaddle a doll in a practice session. Alexia said nothing. She just kept walking, until she returned to her room and found a card sitting on her pillow. No name, just handwriting she recognized immediately. "You won't shame me into fatherhood. I won't be trapped. Don't contact me." Brandon had been here. At some point, quietly, he had walked in, left this message and vanished. Like a thief, not of money, but of decency. Alexia stared at the note, then tore it into pieces and flushed it down the toilet. That night, Ava wouldn't stop crying. She'd been fed, changed, swaddled. Nothing worked. Alexia rocked her slowly, whispering lullabies through cracked lips. "I'm here. I'm here. I'm here." She sang until Ava's eyes fluttered closed again, and then she cried quietly, shoulders shaking, trying not to wake her daughter. She wasn't mourning Brandon. She was mourning the version of herself that once believed she was safe. The next morning, Dr. Trent came in with the discharge paperwork. "Vitals look good. Wounds healing. You're strong." Alexia nodded. "You going home alone?" "Yes." "You have help?" "No." Dr. Trent sighed gently. "Well, you're not the first, but you're one of the few who still looks like she's standing." Alexia chuckled. "Sitting, actually. You'll stand." "You already are." She signed the forms. By noon, she was cleared to leave. A hospital transport worker helped carry her bag and wheeled Ava to the curbside exit. Alexia stepped outside slowly, the chill of the fall air waking every nerve in her body. No car was waiting, no limo, no driver, just city noise and a cab rank across the street. She lifted Ava into her arms. The driver rushed forward. "Need a ride, miss?" "Yes," she said. "South Shore." He held the door open, and she slid in slowly, holding Ava tightly. As the car pulled away, Alexia didn't look back. The mansion wasn't her destination. There was no going back to that silence, no need to stand in front of marble floors and wonder if she mattered. She had already been discarded, and now she was going to rise. They arrived at the apartment. Second floor, no elevator, cracked paint and warm lighting. She paid the driver, thanked him, and carried Ava up herself. Each step hurt, but she counted them like a victory. 1, 2, 3, 16. At the top, she paused. Ava whimpered in her sleep. Alexia exhaled and turned the key. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and dust. The mattress lay on the floor. a second-hand crib in the corner. She stepped in, closed the door, and said softly, "Welcome home, baby girl." She laid Ava in the crib, covered her with the floral blanket, and sat cross-legged on the mattress. She had no energy left, but she had peace. Real peace. No Brandon, no Nellie, no judgment, no tension. Just her daughter, just her strength, just a future. She reached into her bag, pulled out her notebook, and wrote a single sentence on the first page. He gave me a choice. I chose the one who couldn't walk away. Alexia didn't expect sleep. The painkillers had worn off, and her body throbbed in quiet protest. But the apartment was still, and Ava, finally, slept. She lay on the mattress, her hand on her belly, scar aching beneath the gauze. Her eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling. No chandelier here, no crown molding, just a water stain in the corner and a tiny crack running diagonally across the drywall. But it felt more honest than the estate ever did. This wasn't a house of secrets. It was the beginning of truth. The next morning, she stood in front of the window and watched the sunrise filter through sheer curtains. Gold spread across the hardwood floors like a blessing. Her phone vibrated on the counter. For a second, her chest tightened. But it wasn't Brandon. It was the leasing office confirming her deposit cleared. She was officially a tenant now. No shared account, no dependency. Just her name on the line. She exhaled and turned back to Ava, who blinked up at her with sleepy eyes. "You and me, little one," she whispered. Ava cooed softly, her fingers curling. Alexia smiled. Over the next few days, life narrowed down to survival. Feeding, changing, rocking, healing. Every task was small and heavy at once. When she wasn't caring for Ava, she was cleaning or making lists. She tracked diaper counts, applied for WIC, filled out insurance documents with a pen that barely worked. She moved slowly but with purpose. She no longer waited for Brandon to call. She had deleted his number, blocked his email, and still, nothing came. No one searched for her. No one knocked. He had made his choice. And she was finally done holding space for a man who could vanish so easily. On the fourth day in the apartment, she walked to the corner store with Ava strapped to her chest. She needed wipes and bottled water. The cashier, a girl no older than 18, stared at Ava and smiled. "She's beautiful," she said. Alexia nodded. "Thank you. Your first?" "Yes." The girl hesitated. "Doing it alone?" Alexia didn't flinch. Doing it with her. That night, she added a sticky note to her mirror. "I was never abandoned. I was released." She opened her laptop on the fifth night. It was old, but it worked. She created a new folder, the Hope Room. She didn't know what it would be yet, just that it had to exist. A space for women like her, for the abandoned, the blamed, the underestimated. She started typing ideas, and free literacy workshops, and parenting support circles, and safe childcare for job interviews, and weekly resource giveaways, emotional check-ins, with no judgment. It was only an outline, but it felt like oxygen. 2 days later, she received a knock. Not Brandon, not Nellie, just Miss Evelyn from downstairs. She held a plastic bin with baby clothes inside. "Hand-me-downs," she said. "From my niece. Yours if you want them." Alexia blinked, then smiled. "Yes, please." Miss Evelyn stepped inside, looked around the bare apartment, and nodded. "You're doing all right. I can see that." Alexia's throat tightened. "Some days, I don't feel like I am. Feeling it don't mean you're failing, child." Alexia nodded. She folded those clothes like they were designer gifts. At night, Ava cried, sometimes for hours. Alexia learned her sounds, the hungry whine, the scared squeal, the overstimulated gasp. She soothed her daughter, even when her arms shook with exhaustion. She knew now, motherhood wasn't pretty, it was power. On the 7th night, she finally opened her hospital bag again. Tucked in the side pocket was the card Brandon had left at the hospital. She'd torn it up, flushed it, but some part of her wanted to pretend she'd misread it. that maybe it hadn't been as cruel as she remembered. But it was. There had been no misunderstanding, no nuance. Only a man who didn't want to be a father and didn't have the decency to say it face to face. She didn't cry. She closed the bag and pushed it under the bed. She would no longer grieve a man who still had a pulse but no heart. The next morning, she recorded a video. She held Ava to her chest, hair wrapped in a scarf, sweatshirt wrinkled, no makeup. She hit record. "Hi, my name's Alexia, and I'm a new mom. A single mom." She paused. "I didn't choose this path, but I chose not to stay where I wasn't seen." She looked at Ava, who blinked sleepily at the camera. "She's why I keep going. Why I don't wait for apologies that will never come." Her voice cracked but didn't break. "If you're a mother watching this, wondering if you're strong enough, you are." She ended the video there. She didn't think it would go anywhere, but it did. Within 72 hours, the clip had 800 views. Then 2,000. Then a message from an old Roseland colleague. "I saw your video. I left my husband last year." "Your words? They helped." Another message. "I'm in the same situation. Thank you for saying it out loud." Alexia read every comment with a lump in her throat. They didn't know the full story, but they didn't need to. They knew what pain looked like and what healing sounded like. That weekend, she went to the local community center, asked if she could borrow a classroom once a week. The manager, a woman named Carla, said yes without hesitation. "Single moms need a voice," she said. "We'll print flyers." By the end of that month, the Hope Room had its first circle, 6 women, 3 toddlers, 1 stack of baby books, and a fold-out table with juice boxes. Alexia sat in the middle with Ava strapped to her chest. "I don't have all the answers," she said, "but I know what it feels like to be invisible." Heads nodded. Eyes filled. Healing began. She hadn't seen Brandon in 5 weeks. She no longer wondered where he was. She only cared about where she was going. The air inside Memorial Women's Hospital was cold, sterile, and strangely sacred. The walls didn't echo, but Alexia could still feel the sound of her own breathing. Every second stretched into hours. Every blink burned. Her body hadn't caught up to her heart yet. It was still in survival mode, numbing, protecting, healing. But her heart, it had already moved away from Brandon, moved toward Ava, moved into something deeper than hurt. She lay in bed, propped up on pillows, watching Ava sleep in the bassinet beside her. Every few seconds, she'd lean over to make sure her chest was rising. Still breathing, still with me, still here. That was enough. She hadn't slept since delivery, not because of pain, though the incision throbbed with every breath. Not because of noise. The nurses were quiet, respectful. She hadn't slept because she was afraid to close her eyes, afraid it would all vanish, that she'd wake up back in that mansion, back beside a man who stared through her, back in a bed full of lies. But she wasn't there. She was here. Ava was here. And Brandon? He was where he had always been, invisible where it counted most. The morning after the delivery, she asked to walk. The nurse hesitated. "It's a bit early. I need to move." She was helped into a chair first. Blood rushed to her head. Nausea crept in. But she pressed her hands against her thighs and focused. 1 step, then another. She made it halfway down the hallway and back. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The other mothers were asleep. Their rooms filled with flowers, stuffed animals, gift bags. Alexia returned to her room and stared at the single plastic bracelet on her wrist. No visitors, no husband, just her name and Ava's weight in ounces. Later that afternoon, a knock came. She looked up, hopeful, but it wasn't Brandon. It was a hospital caseworker. She wore a light blue cardigan and held a clipboard. "Hi, I'm Lorraine. Just checking in on discharge planning." Alexia nodded slowly. "I'm listening." Lorraine sat gently in the chair across from her. "Your record says you have no listed emergency contacts, no spouse to receive you." "No," Alexia said. Lorraine hesitated. We do offer transitional assistance, temporary housing options, postpartum therapy, childcare referrals. I'll be fine, Alexia interrupted. I have a place. Lorraine blinked. And transportation? I'll get myself home. The woman looked at her, not with pity, but with curiosity. You're calm. Alexia almost laughed. I'm exhausted. That's fair, Lorraine replied. But you're still standing. Alexia looked down at Ava. She deserves a mother who doesn't flinch. Lorraine smiled. You'll do just fine. Back in the room, she unwrapped the donated blanket Mrs. Carver had brought the day before. It was pink with daisies and soft from years of washes. She wrapped Ava in it, held her close, and began humming. No lyrics, just sound. It came from somewhere deep, part lullaby, part prayer. Ava blinked up at her with glassy eyes. You don't know it yet, Alexia whispered, but I chose you before you ever took your first breath. That evening, Imani Cole returned. The night nurse. Her braid was now in a bun. Her shoes squeaked softly against the linoleum. She peeked in and smiled. You still up? Alexia nodded. Barely. Imani came in, sat beside the bed, and looked at Ava. She looks stronger. She is. You're healing fast. I have to. Imani leaned back. It's okay to say you're scared. Alexia looked at her. I'm not scared anymore. I was, when I still thought he might show up. Now? I know he won't. Imani nodded slowly. Some men abandon in words, others abandon in silence. He did both, Alexia said, her voice even. Imani exhaled. That's the kind that changes a woman. Alexia turned to face her. Good. I needed to change. They sat in silence for a few moments. Then Imani stood and placed something on the tray table. A folded card with a handwritten quote on the front. You are not hard to love. They were too small to carry your kind of heart. Alexia's throat tightened. I thought you might need that later, Imani said. I do. She was gone before Alexia could say more. By the second night, Ava was crying more. Her lungs were stronger now, louder. Alexia rocked her, walking slow laps around the room, whispering again and again, I've got you, I've got you, I've got you. Each whisper reminded her that she had someone too. Herself. She sat by the window as Ava slept again. The city lights shimmered beyond the hospital parking lot. A bus rumbled past. Headlights stretched across the pavement. She thought about what came next. No help, no husband, just diapers, WIC appointments, rent, healing, survival. She'd make it work. She'd already done the hard part. She left. She chose herself. She chose Ava. A soft knock at the door. This time, it was Dr. Trent. I wanted to check on you before rounds get crazy. Alexia nodded. Thank you. Discharge in 2 days, but we can hold you longer if you need it. No, Alexia said. I need to start. Doctor. Trent studied her. You're not afraid? I am. But you're ready? More than I've ever been. Dr. Trent smiled and squeezed her hand. You're doing better than most. Alexia returned the smile. Because I finally stopped waiting for him to love me. That night, she wrote her first journal entry since arriving. 3 days ago I gave birth. No partner, no flowers, no witnesses, just strength, sweat, and silence. I don't regret any of it. I loved a man who couldn't love anything that didn't benefit him. But now, I love a little girl who depends on me completely. And for her, I rise. The wheelchair rolled to the curb slowly. Alexia sat upright, one arm cradling Ava, the other resting against her abdomen. Her incision pulled with every bump, but she didn't flinch. The transport staff waited beside her with the discharge papers and a well-practiced smile. No one coming to pick you up? The young woman asked. Alexia shook her head. No. A pause. You sure you're okay? Alexia looked down at her daughter, then back up. I'm not okay. I'm ready. The woman didn't ask anything else. She nodded and handed Alexia her things. Behind them, the hospital doors slid shut with a whisper. Alexia didn't look back. A cab pulled up moments later. The driver stepped out, saw the baby, and moved quickly. "South Shore, right?" he asked, taking the bag. "Yes." He opened the door carefully and helped her in. "Congrats, by the way." She knew. 3 days. Strong lungs, he said, smiling. Alexia gave a soft nod. She gets that from me. They drove in silence. The city stretched around them, a blur of early morning deliveries, storefronts opening, and school buses yawning to life. This was her world now. No penthouse, no luxury sedan, no catered postnatal care. Just her, and Ava, and the road ahead. The apartment was small, but it welcomed her back like a warm exhale. The key turned with a satisfying click. Inside, it smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner and freshly unpacked cardboard. The mattress was still on the floor. The curtains were uneven, but it was home. She laid Ava in the bassinet and sat slowly at the edge of the bed, holding her midsection. The quiet pressed in, but this wasn't the cold silence of Brandon's estate. This silence was earned. She unpacked the hospital bag, wipes, nipple cream, the pink floral blanket, the discharge instructions she'd already memorized. Tucked at the bottom was the new mom resource booklet. She didn't throw it away. She folded it and slid it into a drawer, because she wasn't done needing help, just done pretending she didn't. That evening, she warmed a bottle with one hand and swaddled Ava with the other. Her body moved like muscle memory now. It didn't feel natural, but it felt right. Ava fussed, then settled. Alexia sat cross-legged on the mattress, the baby on her chest, her phone lighting up with low battery warnings. Still no missed calls. Still no new messages. Not even a congratulations. Brandon had made his silence permanent. But something else buzzed in her notifications. A message from one of her old students' mothers at Roseland. "I heard what happened. You don't owe me anything, but if you ever need extra diapers or someone to sit with the baby while you nap, text me." Another message followed. "You always showed up for my kid. Let me show up for you." Alexia stared at the screen. Her heart swelled, not because someone offered help, but because someone remembered who she was before Brandon. She opened her journal again that night. "You never broke me. You stripped away the noise, and what's left is mine to build." She paused, then added, "Let them keep the headlines. I'll keep the peace." The next morning, she dressed Ava in one of the donated onesies with tiny elephants on it. They walked to the corner store. The cashier, same girl as before, smiled wide when she saw them. "She looks strong," she said. "She is. You too." Alexia smiled. "I know." She bought wipes, oatmeal, and a notebook. She was going to use it to plan the Hope Room. She already had the name. The logo would come later. The funding, somehow. But the mission, clear as breath. Build something for women like me, for mothers who had to walk away quietly, for those who chose love without applause. That night, Ava fussed for an hour straight. Alexia rocked her in the bathroom, sitting on the toilet lid, steam rising from a hot shower nearby to ease the newborn congestion. She sang, off-key, tired, raw, but the baby settled. She held her close and whispered, "You don't have to be anything other than loved." And she meant it, with every bone in her body. Later that week, she received a letter from a private courier. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was familiar. Brandon's, one line. "Don't use my name in anything you do." She read it, once, twice, then burned it over the kitchen sink. Some ashes floated, some stuck to the metal. She wiped them away with a damp paper towel and whispered, "You don't get to write my story, not anymore." She took a photo of Ava sleeping in the soft morning light, posted it on a private page with only 10 trusted friends. The caption read, "She's my reason, and my reward. We are doing fine." That post didn't go viral, but it didn't need to. She wasn't chasing reach. She was chasing real. Have you ever had to start over? Not because you were weak, but because you finally had the strength to walk away. Alexia's journey is one that many carry silently. If you've ever had to choose peace over presence, truth over appearances, or love over being tolerated, this story is for you. Comment below with, if you've rebuilt after heartbreak. Share it with someone who needs to remember, you are not hard to love. You were just surrounded by people too small to hold you. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more powerful truths wrapped in storytelling. Because strength deserves a spotlight. The room smelled like fresh paint, old dust, and something faintly sweet, maybe. The leftover vanilla scent from the last community group that met there. It wasn't much. Just a church basement with mismatched chairs, cracked tile, and a humming fridge that didn't quite close all the way. But, to Alexia, it was sacred ground. Her daughter slept in a second-hand bassinet beside her, and across from her sat 6 women, some with infants on their laps, others with tired eyes and tired hearts. No one spoke at first, so Alexia stood. "Welcome," she said, voice soft but clear. "This isn't a place for judgment or pity. This is a place where we say out loud the things we've been forced to whisper." One woman exhaled like she'd been holding it in for weeks. Another looked at her baby, then wiped her eyes. Alexia continued, "I'm not a therapist or a preacher. I'm not even someone who has it all together." She gestured to Ava. "I'm a mother who was told to choose, and I chose her." The Hope Room wasn't funded by any big charity. There was no sponsor, just donated chairs, a pile of children's books, and a woman who had survived abandonment with a newborn on her hip. Alexia started with what she had, herself. She reached out to the local library for free books, posted in Facebook mom groups for donations, walked the blocks with Ava in her chest carrier, handing out printed flyers that read, "The Hope Room, a safe space for single moms. Books, baby supplies. No judgment." No one questioned her credentials, because women in pain don't ask for resumes, they ask for shelter. After the first session, one of the moms, Sierra, stayed behind. She looked no older than 22, with braids pulled into a bun and a baby boy who didn't stop kicking. "I almost didn't come," Sierra said, bouncing her son. "I thought it'd just be another place telling me what I'm doing wrong." Alexia smiled. "No one in this room came because they were perfect. We came because we kept going." Sierra nodded. "I didn't even know I needed this." "You do," Alexia said. "We all do." Back at home, she wrote everything down in a spiral notebook. What worked, what didn't, who donated, who showed up, what someone said that made another mother cry and exhale and finally speak. Each week, she adjusted. Sometimes the snacks ran out. Sometimes she couldn't afford the bus fare and had to walk. Sometimes Ava cried through half the session, but no one complained. Because this wasn't about Polish. This was about presence. 2 weeks in, a small parenting blog featured her after someone from the center mentioned her work. They called her the Southside Motherhood Builder. It made her laugh. She wasn't trying to be famous. She was trying to survive and offer that survival to others. One evening, she sat on the floor feeding Ava with one hand and answering messages with the other. A woman named Janice had sent a DM. "I'm in Ohio. I saw your story on TikTok." I cried. My ex walked out when I was 8 months pregnant. I didn't even know I was allowed to feel angry about it. "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." Alexia replied simply, "You don't owe silence to people who abandoned you. And then, you're allowed to rebuild." She began filming short videos, nothing professional. Just her, Ava, and a message. Video 1. Your baby doesn't need a perfect mother. She needs a present one. Video 2. You are not a failure because someone walked away. Video 3. Let them keep the mansion. You keep your peace. Each video got more views, not viral. But enough. Enough for women across the country to whisper, "Me too." One Sunday morning, while holding Ava and sipping tea in a chipped mug, she got an email from a woman named Celine Hartman, documentary producer, independent, focused on community stories that don't get told. Subject: "Sorry, I saw your message. I'd like to help tell your story." Alexia's first instinct was hesitation. She hadn't built the Hope Room to be seen. She built it so women like her didn't have to feel invisible. But something about Celine's message was different. No promises, no PR pitch. Just, not everyone survives what you did with grace. People need to know it's possible. Alexia read it twice. Then, Ava gurgled and drooled all over her shoulder. She smiled and replied, "If we tell it, we tell all of it. No filters, no polish, just truth." That evening, at the next Hope Room session, Alexia stood before 10 mothers, her biggest circle yet. The heater buzzed in the background. The windows let in a chill. But inside, the room was full of warmth. "You don't need to be perfect to be a good mom," she said. "You don't need to be in love to be worthy of love. You just need to stay." She looked at Ava. I stayed. Even when someone told me to choose. Sierra raised her hand. "Do you think they ever feel bad for leaving?" Alexia paused, then nodded once. "Maybe, but we're too busy healing to wait for their guilt to catch up." That night, as Ava slept on her chest, Alexia opened her journal again. "I'm not the same woman who walked into that hospital 3 weeks ago. I left with a baby in my arms and no one beside me. But I also left with a voice I'd never had before. My life didn't shrink. It opened." She closed the book and kissed the top of Ava's head. Tomorrow was another meeting. Another mother might walk in. Scared, ashamed, ready to quit. But they'd sit, and they'd talk, and they'd know they weren't alone. And that was everything. The camera crew arrived early on a cloudy Wednesday. There was no red carpet, no polished lighting. Just Celine with a handheld mic, a sound guy with gentle eyes, and a camerawoman who carried snacks in her bag for the babies in the room. Alexia opened the basement door with Ava on her hip. "No makeup crew?" she asked. Celine smiled. "This story doesn't need it." Alexia exhaled. Good. She didn't want to look like a hero. She wanted to look real. The other moms were already gathering, more than ever before. 14. This time, word had spread. It wasn't just the blog or the short clips. It was the whispers in group chats. The "Hey girl, come with me next week" invitations. The tired, overwhelmed, freshly abandoned women who didn't want to cry alone in their cars anymore. Now they had this, the Hope Room. And now the Hope Room had a camera. Celine didn't direct much. She didn't need to. Alexia's words filled the space with something strong and simple. "I didn't grow up thinking I'd raise a child on my own," she said, sitting in a circle, Ava gumming on her keys beside her. "I didn't think I'd marry a man who would believe his mother over me, especially when our daughter was fighting for air." She paused. "Let the weight settle. But life doesn't ask for your permission before it breaks you. It just does. And then it waits to see who you'll become afterward." One of the newer women, Tamira, cried softly in the back. Another reached over to squeeze her hand. At the end of the session, Celine approached Alexia outside the church doors. "We're airing it next month," she said. "But we're also submitting it to a short doc festival. It's not just about you, it's about all of you." Alexia nodded. "Good, it never was about me alone." She looked down at Ava. "But if this helps just one woman breathe again, then it was worth it." A week later, Alexia stood in front of her apartment mirror, holding a worn envelope in her hand. It had no return address, just her name, neatly written. She opened it slowly. Inside was a folded note, handwritten. "I saw the video. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to say thank you for choosing her, for not letting my absence define her beginning. I was wrong about everything, and I know words can't fix what I broke, but I'm still proud of the woman you are." No signature, but she knew who wrote it. Brandon, her ex-husband, the man who believed his mother's lie over the woman he'd vowed to protect. Alexia sat down on the couch. Heart calm, no anger, no pain, just silence. And in that silence, she knew. She didn't need him to fix anything. He was late, and she wasn't waiting anymore. Weeks passed. The Hope Room grew. A volunteer doula joined the team, A bakery offered weekly bread donations. A woman who once sat in the back with her hood up now hosted the circle when Alexia needed rest. Ava turned 6 months old, cut her first tooth, giggled every time she saw a camera. And one day, Alexia walked into the space to see a flyer someone else had taped on the wall. "We don't stay silent. We don't stay hurt. We stay..." It had her photo beside it, a still from the documentary. She smiled. Not from pride, from peace. That night, she fed Ava and scrolled through comments under the film, which had quietly racked up over 100,000 views on YouTube. Some comments were short. "This made me cry. I needed this. Thank you, Alexia." Others told full stories of betrayal, of single motherhood, of rebuilding. But one caught her eye. "You reminded me that dignity doesn't mean silence. It means choosing yourself anyway. Thank you for helping me walk into court today and finally file for custody." Alexia stared at that message for a long moment, then whispered to Ava, "We didn't just survive, we started something." 2 months later, a woman knocked on her door. Alexia opened it cautiously. The woman was older, with short silver curls and expensive shoes. She looked nothing like the desperate stories Alexia usually heard, but her eyes told the truth. "I saw your video," she said, "and I know it wasn't meant for women like me." Alexia tilted her head. "What kind of woman are you?" The woman hesitated. "The one who was on the other side. I told my son to leave her. I told him she wasn't worthy." She swallowed. "I was wrong. I see that now." Alexia stepped aside and let her in. A week later, the two of them, Alexia and the once proud mother-in-law, who never believed her, sat on folding chairs side by side at the Hope Room. They didn't pretend it was easy, but they didn't pretend at all. The fall breeze swept through the open window of Alexia's one-bedroom apartment. The worn-out couch, the second-hand rug, the drying baby bottles on the kitchen rack. They didn't reflect the life she had walked away from, but they mirrored the one she had built with intention. Ava babbled on the playmat, clapping her tiny hands, her laughter filling the room with a warmth no mansion ever had. Alexia sat at the dining table, a stack of unopened letters and envelopes in front of her. Most were bills, thank you notes from mothers who had benefited from the Hope Room, and one was from a lawyer with the Ellis and Rothman firm. She didn't touch that one. Not yet. Instead, she pulled out an old notebook, a fabric-covered journal she'd started during the loneliest weeks of her pregnancy. Between pages of grocery lists and baby prep checklists was a letter she never intended to send. "Dear Brandon, by the time you read this, if you ever do, I'll already be gone. Not physically perhaps, but emotionally. I used to think you were just lost, that one day you'd turn around and see me waiting, but love should never feel like waiting, or bleeding in silence." She paused, ran her fingers over the ink-stained page. She had written those words the week after Ava's birth, when sleep was rare and tears came easy. Her eyes drifted toward Ava, now curled over her storybook, flipping pages she couldn't yet read. That child, that light, was why she never sent the letter. Brandon wasn't owed an explanation. He was offered presence and chose absence. Still, tonight, the past tugged harder than usual. There had been murmurs in town. A new tech hub was launching in the city, an Ellis Innovations expansion. She hadn't confirmed it. She hadn't asked. But deep down, she knew Brandon was back in Chicago. Celine Hartman had called the night before. The follow-up documentary will feature more of your daily life. Are you still comfortable filming at the Hope Room? Yes, Alexia had replied without hesitation. And there's a segment where we show the progress of Ellis Innovations in educational tech. We'll keep your ex anonymous, but if you're uncomfortable... Alexia had paused. No, let it run. My story stands on its own. That was her power now, the refusal to be small for anyone else's comfort. Even Brandon's. A knock broke the quiet. She looked through the peephole. It was Imani. Alexia smiled and opened the door. "You're early." "I brought empanadas," Imani grinned, holding up a foil-wrapped bundle. "And a ton of baby wipes from the clinic. You're a lifesaver." They sat cross-legged on the floor, Ava between them, munching on soft banana slices. Imani glanced around. "You look distracted." Alexia exhaled. "He's back." Brandon, quietly. "But he's back." Imani didn't flinch. "Do you want to see him?" "No. But I think I'll have to." There was silence before Imani added, "Then make sure it's on your terms." Alexia nodded. Later that night, after Ava had been put to sleep and Imani left, Alexia pulled out her phone. She opened a blank email draft and began to write, "To Brandon Ellis, subject. Regarding your message, Brandon, you said you wanted to meet Ava. I won't reopen the door you walked out of, but I also won't stop a child from knowing where she comes from. We'll meet in a public space. 1 hour, no expectations, no cameras, no second chances. If you agree, respond by Friday. Alexia." She hovered over the send button, then tapped it. She had grown stronger, not because she wanted to face him, but because she wasn't afraid to anymore. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the wide windows of the Hope Room's community space. Warm, golden, steady. Children laughed from the reading corner, while moms picked up donated supplies from the shelves. Volunteers were guiding 2 new visitors, a teen mother and her aunt, through the intake process. Alexia stood by a table of gently used baby carriers, Ava strapped snug. Against her chest, cheeks soft and flush from her afternoon nap. Her eyes moved from item to item, mentally counting what needed restocking. "And Ms. Carson?" The voice behind her didn't match any she expected to hear inside these walls. Not a donor, not a city official, not a journalist. It was Nellie Ellis. Alexia slowly turned, her entire body stiffening as she adjusted Ava on her chest. She didn't speak. She waited. Nellie looked tired. Gone was the sharp elegance. She wore a long beige coat over dark slacks, her hair pulled back, her makeup lighter than usual. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles pale. "I'm not here to cause a scene," Nellie said softly. "Or to insult you." Alexia raised a brow. "Then I assume you're lost." Nellie exhaled. "I was wrong." That silenced the noise in Alexia's mind for a moment. "I was wrong about you," Nellie repeated. "About what you could handle, about who you are." Alexia held Ava a little closer, gently bouncing her out of habit. "You said I was trying to trap your son. I know what I said." Her voice cracked. "And I know what Brandon said to you the night Ava was born. I found out weeks later. He never told me. I overheard him arguing with his assistant." Alexia blinked. "I came to say that I'm sorry. Not because it changes anything, but because I need you to hear it." Nellie's chin trembled, just once. "And because I needed to meet her." She glanced at the baby girl asleep against Alexia's chest. "That child carries our name. And I've never seen her face." Alexia's hand protectively covered Ava's head. "You don't get to drop apologies and expect access." "I know." Alexia hesitated. "Why now?" Nellie stepped forward a little. "Because I saw the documentary, and I saw what my silence created. I blamed you for a lot of things I never had the courage to face in my own son." Alexia didn't reply. "I'm not asking to be a grandmother. I'm not asking for visits or rites or family dinners." She paused. "I'm asking for a photo." A tear slipped down Nellie's cheek. "Just one, so I know she exists outside of my mistakes." Alexia studied the older woman. All the pain Nellie had caused, all the names she'd called her, the judgment, the absence. The night her son sent that message and Nellie said nothing. Alexia could have said no. She could have shut the door Nellie should have knocked on years ago. But Ava shifted, yawned, and opened her eyes. Wide, dark brown, calm and curious. Alexia stepped back, pulled her phone from her back pocket, and snapped a quick photo of Ava resting on her shoulder. She held the screen out. "This is Ava. Strong, peaceful, safe." Nellie reached out with shaking hands and took the phone. Her breath hitched. "She looks like you." Alexia nodded. "That's the part I'm proud of." After a pause, she took the phone back. "Goodbye, Mrs. Ellis." Nellie blinked fast and gave a small nod. "Goodbye, Alexia." She turned and walked out of the Hope Room with slow, quiet steps. Alexia didn't watch her go. She kissed Ava's forehead and turned toward the community room again, the place where she had rebuilt. That night, Alexia sat on her balcony after putting Ava to bed. Her laptop buzzed beside her with new partnership offers. A publishing company wanted her to write a guide for new mothers. A TV network wanted to license the documentary. She was being asked to speak at conferences she used to watch online in silence. She sipped tea and stared at the moonlight glowing over South Shore. She hadn't needed Nellie's visit, but maybe, in some strange way, it closed a door. Not for Nellie, for her. She pulled out a notebook and began to draft her next community event, a Letters to Our Daughters campaign, where single moms could write messages of love to their children. They would print them, display them, and turn them into a book, a legacy. She wrote the first line for her own letter. "To Ava Hope, you were never the second choice. You were the beginning of everything I didn't know I needed." As she wrote, a notification pinged on her phone. She glanced at it briefly. "Blocked number, you inspired the world. I just hope one day you'll forgive me." She sighed. Another door she wouldn't open. She muted the phone, tucked her baby monitor into her pocket, and went inside. Ava stirred in her crib, and Alexia stood beside her. No noise, no pain, just peace. She smiled. No matter who reached out, no matter what came next, she had already chosen the life that mattered. The morning sun filtered through the gauzy curtains of Alexia's modest apartment. Ava had woken early, babbling to herself in her crib, tiny hands reaching for the mobile above her. Alexia stood in the kitchen, warming up a bottle, while her mind buzzed with everything on her checklist. She had a meeting with the city's youth literacy fund at noon, and Celine was dropping by later to finalize the last shoot for the documentary's follow-up. Despite her tight schedule, Alexia felt light, focused. She no longer lived in survival mode. As she walked back to the nursery, bottle in hand, Ava stretched her arms toward her with that gummy smile that could melt stone. Alexia scooped her up, kissed her cheeks, and whispered, "You're the best thing I ever did." They sat by the window as Alexia fed her daughter, the city slowly coming to life outside. Halfway through the bottle, a sharp knock hit the door. Alexia frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone until late afternoon. She gently laid Ava back in her crib, grabbed a towel to wipe her hands, and approached the door cautiously. When she opened it, her breath caught. Brandon stood there, hair shorter, suit impeccable, but face pale like he hadn't slept properly in days. Behind him, a sleek black car idled at the curb. Alexia's first instinct was to close the door. The only thing that stopped her was the calm expression on his face. Not arrogance, not pity, something else. "Alexia," he said quietly, "can we talk?" She crossed her arms. "About what?" He glanced past her shoulder, clearly trying to peek inside. "Ava, I haven't seen her. She's fine." "And she's asleep," Alexia cut in. "You didn't come when she was born. You didn't come for months. You chose not to be there." "I know," he said, his voice cracking ever so slightly. "I was wrong." Alexia stared at him. "You texted me in the delivery room, told me to choose. And I did. I chose her. So what are you doing here now?" Brandon rubbed the back of his neck. "I saw the full documentary, and I've been watching your literacy campaign grow. You've turned pain into purpose. I didn't come here to justify anything. I came because I realized something important." Alexia raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "That you didn't break me," he said, eyes searching hers. "You exposed me. You showed me who I was and who I wasn't ready to be." She held the door halfway open, resisting the temptation to step into that space they used to share. "And now you're ready?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but I'm ready to try. I want to know my daughter. I want to be part of her life. On your terms, not mine." Silence sat heavy between them. Alexia finally sighed and leaned against the doorframe. "You know what the hardest part was? Not the labor, not the recovery. It was watching that hospital door, hoping you'd walk through it. And when you didn't, I still told Ava stories about you, kind ones, because I didn't want her to grow up feeling unwanted. Brandon looked down, ashamed. Let me prove to you that I'm not that man anymore, he said softly. I'm not asking to come back. I just want to start, whatever you'll allow. Alexia didn't respond right away. Instead, she glanced toward Ava's room, the baby monitor screen flickering with soft light. Finally, she opened the door just a little wider. You can sit. 10 minutes, that's it. And if she wakes, you speak gently and you don't make promises you can't keep. Brandon stepped in slowly, as though walking into a holy place. And for him, it was. The home Alexia had built, the life she had forged without him, it demanded reverence. He sat on the edge of the couch, eyes scanning the neat space. It wasn't lavish, but it was full of life. Books, soft blankets, a basket of toys. Evidence of care. Thank you, he said. Alexia stayed near the doorway, arms crossed, watching him. He cleared his throat. My mother doesn't know I'm here. She shouldn't, Alexia said bluntly. Her voice poisoned everything. And you let her. I know. I let fear drive me. Fear of disappointing her, the board, everyone but you. Ava stirred in the other room. Brandon's head turned sharply. Is she? She's fine, Alexia said. Just dreaming. Brandon smiled faintly. I dreamt of her too, even before I saw the documentary. But I was too ashamed to reach out. Alexia's eyes softened, but her tone stayed firm. Don't come here looking for forgiveness. This isn't a redemption arc, this is real life. She's real. You can't touch in and out. He nodded. Then let me start with presents. I'd like to come to one of your literacy events. Sit in the back, no cameras, no press. Alexia's brows lifted. Why? Because I want to support the woman you've become. Alexia tilted her head. You never saw her before. I did, he said. But I was too selfish to value her. The silence now was different, not cold, but cautious. From the monitor, Ava's soft cry echoed. Alexia turned and walked toward the nursery. Brandon stood, unsure whether to follow. She returned with Ava in her arms, her curls a wild halo around her sleepy face. When the baby saw the stranger, she tilted her head, uncertain. Alexia held her close. This is Ava. Brandon's eyes welled up as he whispered, Hi, baby girl. Ava blinked, then snuggled closer into her mother's chest. Alexia's voice remained steady. She doesn't know you. That's not her fault. Brandon nodded. I'll earn it, every bit of it, if you let me. Alexia said nothing more. She turned and walked toward the nursery, letting the door remain open behind her. When she returned, Brandon had let himself out. She looked down to find a handwritten note on the table. Thank you for opening the door, even if just a little. B. Alexia folded the note in half, placed it inside a drawer, and stood still for a moment. She wasn't letting him in, but she hadn't closed the door either. The morning of the interview arrived, quiet and golden. Sunlight poured through the thin curtains of their South Shore apartment. Alexia stood at the window, Ava nestled against her hip, humming softly. The Hope Room documentary had changed everything, but this next moment might expand it. The interview was set to air on a major daytime show hosted by Diana Carver, known for her direct, no-fluff style. Alexia had reviewed the questions in advance. Nothing invasive, nothing naming Brandon. But one phrase lingered in the preview copy. How did you build from nothing? She looked around their modest living room. The walls were now lined with donated bookshelves. Photographs of the early days of the Hope Room hung between crayon drawings Ava had made with her left hand. Imani had taught her to color outside the lines. From nothing? No. She had started with faith, with breath, with a name she whispered to her daughter's sleeping face when no one else was listening. Alexia smiled softly. Imani entered the room, holding a pressed linen blouse and navy pants. It's time, Mama. You ready? Alexia took a slow breath. Yeah. I think I've been ready. Imani handed her the clothes. Let's remind the world that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. They shared a look that said everything: survival, sisterhood, and quiet revolution. The studio lights were bright, too bright maybe. But Alexia didn't flinch. Diana Carver greeted her with a firm handshake. "People know your story," she said, "but they don't know your voice yet. Speak your truth today. Don't water it down." Alexia nodded. When the cameras rolled, Diana began with warm tones. "Today we're joined by the woman behind one of the most moving documentaries of the year, The Baby She Chose. Alexia Carson." "Welcome." Alexia smiled, calm and composed. "Thank you for having me." Diana leaned in. "Millions of women watched you talk about strength, sacrifice, and motherhood. But what pushed you to speak publicly after so much silence?" Alexia answered without pause. "Because silence doesn't always mean peace. I needed women to know that leaving isn't the end. It's a kind of beginning." The studio went quiet. She continued. "I was in labor, my body breaking, my heart in pieces, and I got a message that shattered what was left of my marriage. But in that moment, I realized the greatest gift I could give my daughter was a version of me that wasn't begging to be loved." Diana blinked, visibly moved. "You're shaking tables today." The audience applauded. "And the Hope Room?" Diana asked. "It started with no money, no team, and now it's a network of support centers across the Midwest. What's next?" Alexia's eyes lit up. "We're expanding. More cities, more stories, more women helping each other heal. It's not charity, it's community." Cheers followed. The energy lifted the room. But just as Diana began to close the segment, a producer rushed over and handed her a card. Diana's expression changed. "We've just received something unexpected," she said, glancing at Alexia. "A surprise message." Alexia stiffened, her fingers curling into the armrest. "From your ex-husband." A murmur ran through the crowd. Imani stood backstage, jaw tightening. Alexia took a breath. She didn't want this. Not today. But she nodded for Diana to proceed. The screen behind them flickered. A pre-recorded video played. Brandon Ellis, seated in what looked like a private office, spoke into the camera. "I watched the documentary, and I've seen the work Alexia's doing. I won't rewrite the past or explain my actions. I made a choice that night. She made a better one." The room went silent. Brandon continued. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to say the world needs more women like her. Ava is lucky, and so was I. While I had them." The video cut off. Alexia blinked, stone still. Diana turned to her. "You don't have to respond." But Alexia did. She looked into the camera. "Brandon Ellis was part of my story, but not the whole story. My life didn't begin with him, and it won't end at his apology." The crowd roared. Imani exhaled backstage, relief and pride. Later that evening, Alexia returned home with Ava, who had stayed with Dr. Trent during the taping. The little girl ran to her mother, arms wide. "Mummy, you were on the big TV," Ava said, eyes glowing. Alexia knelt and hugged her tight. "I was, and you were on my mind the whole time." Ava grinned. "Did the people like your story?" "They did, baby. But more importantly, they heard it." That night, Alexia lay awake, Ava's small hand resting on her chest. Brandon's video played in her mind again. Not his face, but his words. She made a better choice. Yes, she did. And tomorrow, she'd keep choosing better. For Ava. For herself. For every woman who had to walk through fire and still smile in public. Alexia reached over, opened her laptop, and began typing her next project, Raising Hope, the podcast, because silence had once protected her. Now, her voice would protect others. The day after the interview, Alexia woke to an avalanche of messages. Her inbox was flooded. Instagram tags climbed by the hour. The Hope Room's website crashed twice. News outlets ran headlines like, "The woman who walked out pregnant and built an empire of healing. Alexia Carson's truth shakes daytime TV. A CEO's regret, a mother's rise." She stood in the kitchen, barefoot, holding a mug of tea, watching Ava draw at the table. The child hummed quietly, coloring a picture of a smiling woman with curly hair holding hands with a little girl. Alexia blinked. That was them. She crouched beside her. "Is this us?" Ava nodded. "You're the superhero. You fix everything." Alexia kissed her cheek, then stood, her heart aching in the best way. Imani arrived moments later, waving a stack of mail like a trophy. "You've got letters, actual letters." "People still do that?" Alexia laughed. "What? No scrolls or pigeons?" Imani sat at the table, flipping through envelopes. Some are donations, others are requests, speaking engagements, book deals, partnerships. "You've officially crossed into icon territory." Alexia raised an eyebrow. "Let's not jump. I'm serious. Oprah's people reached out." She choked on her tea. "Stop it." "Not kidding." Alexia stared out the window, overwhelmed. A few months ago she was living in a motel, holding her daughter through the night, unsure how they'd make it to morning. Now, she had a platform, a purpose and peace, but something still tugged at her. Unfinished. Not regret, not longing, just unanswered space. Meanwhile, across the city, Brandon Ellis sat in his office, the silence deafening. He had expected backlash. He had expected judgment. But he hadn't expected reflection. His phone hadn't stopped ringing either, but the calls were different. Investors commended his maturity. Board members appreciated his public accountability. And his mother? Nellie hadn't said much, just sat across from him at the breakfast table that morning, sipping her coffee. Then, without looking up, she muttered, "She was never beneath us." We were beneath her grace. It struck him harder than any headline. Brandon turned to his assistant. "Schedule something." She looked up. "With who?" He paused. "With my lawyer, and with my mother." Back at the Hope Room, Alexia and Imani stood in the main hall. They were organizing supplies for their new outpost launching in Indianapolis. "Do you think he meant it?" Imani asked. Alexia didn't turn. "Who?" Imani gave her a look. Alexia sighed. "It doesn't matter what he meant. It matters what I believe." "And what do you believe?" Alexia looked over at the wall, the mural of mothers with children, painted with fire and light. "I believe I'm not the same woman who cried when he told me to choose." Imani reached out, squeezed her arm. "That's the only answer you need." The next week, Alexia agreed to a panel on motherhood and identity hosted at the University of Chicago. The audience was mostly young women, but the questions cut deep. A student raised her hand. "You said you didn't lose yourself in motherhood. How?" Alexia paused. "I didn't let motherhood erase me. I let it expand me." The room was silent. She continued, "And being a mother doesn't mean disappearing. It means becoming someone worth being remembered by your child." Applause broke out. Backstage afterward, a woman approached her quietly. Late 30s, soft smile, nervous hands. "I was watching your interview, and I just wanted to say I walked away too, not from a CEO but from a man who made me feel like I was nothing." Alexia hugged her. "You're not nothing. You're the whole story." Later that night, back in their apartment, Alexia sat on the couch scrolling through messages. One DM caught her eye. From b.ellis@ellisinnovations.com. Subject: Ava's trust fund proposal. Alexia stared at the screen, her body tensing. He didn't call. He didn't show up at her door. He emailed. She clicked it open. "Alexia, I don't expect a response, but I've set up a private trust for Ava. She doesn't need my name, but she deserves my support. I've instructed the lawyers that you have full control. I'll never interfere." I also watched the full interview again. "You didn't need to say my name. You said more by leaving it out. I'm proud of who you've become, and I'm sorry for who I was. Brandon." Alexia closed the laptop gently. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply walked over to Ava's room, kissed her on the forehead, and whispered, "You're already richer than gold." She turned out the light. Because some things didn't need applause or a camera. Some choices just needed peace. The room held its breath as Alexia stepped down from the stage. The crowd's standing ovation still echoed, but she didn't bask in it. Her eyes went straight to Ava, who was awake now, stretching on Imani's lap like a cat in sunlight. That moment mattered more than all the applause in the world. Alexia reached them. Imani stood, tears in her eyes. "You did that, Lex." "I just told the truth," Alexia replied, kissing Ava's forehead. Dr. Marisol Trent walked over next, her white coat replaced with a navy blouse and jeans. "That was powerful," she said softly. "I hope you realize what you've built." Alexia nodded, a small smile forming. "I'm starting to—" The three women stood together for a moment. 3 chapters of the same story. One who delivered Ava, one who helped raise her, and one who refused to break. But as they stepped toward the back exit, Celine caught up, phone in hand. "You need to see this," she said, eyes wide. Alexia's stomach dipped. "What is it?" Celine turned the phone around. A trending video. A clip from her speech, but not from Celine's camera. Someone in the crowd had filmed Ava, resting peacefully on Imani's lap, while Alexia's voice rang out. "He told me to choose between him and our child. I chose a daughter who will never have to beg for love." The caption read, "Real Queen Energy." She chose her daughter. The world needs more Alexias. Over 1.2 million views in under 3 hours. Alexia stared at it, not in fear. In clarity, this wasn't about her anymore. This was about every woman who'd been made to feel small for choosing herself or her child. She handed the phone back. "Let it spread." Celine grinned. "Already has." Later that night, after dinner and bedtime stories, after Ava finally fell asleep cuddled next to her favorite stuffed turtle, Alexia sat on the floor of their apartment, laptop open. Emails flooded in, speaking requests, collaboration invites, a feature request from Essence, a literacy grant offer from a major non-profit. But one message stood out. From Ellis Innovations HR. Subject, Legal and Custody Inquiry. She clicked. "Dear Miss Carson, Mr. Brandon Ellis has expressed interest in re-establishing legal visitation rights regarding Ava Hope Ellis. We advise initiating a preliminary mediation to review parental involvement. Please confirm your availability." Alexia stared at the screen. Her hands curled into fists. He still wouldn't speak to her directly, still hiding behind teams and titles. She closed the laptop. No, she had already answered him. The day she blocked his number. The day she walked out of the hospital with her daughter in her arms and no husband at her side. He didn't want a child. He wanted control. She wasn't giving him either. The next morning, she called a lawyer, a woman named Camille Barrett, recommended by Imani. "I don't want shared custody," Alexia said. He hasn't seen her since birth, and now that she's in the spotlight, he remembers he's a father. Camille's voice was steady. "You're within your rights to deny visitation if there's a clear pattern of abandonment." Is 3 years clear enough? Crystal. They filed the papers that week. But the media caught wind. The phrase, "Billionaire Dad seeks custody of secret daughter," hit entertainment blogs. Alexia didn't read the articles. She focused on what mattered. That Friday, the Hope Room held its biggest event yet, an outdoor read, allowed for mothers and children across the South Shore community. Volunteers brought books. A local bakery donated snacks. Alexia wore a green shirt that read, "Story Time Saves Lives." As she sat in a wide circle with 20 children and their moms, Ava crawled into her lap mid-sentence. "Can I read, Mummy?" Alexia nodded and handed her the book. Ava read slowly, sounding out each word like she was discovering treasure. No stutters, no nerves, just joy. The moms clapped when she finished. That night, as they walked home, Ava looked up and asked, "Why don't I have a daddy like Mia at school?" Alexia exhaled, the moment she dreaded. She knelt down to Ava's level. "You do have a dad. He made some choices that weren't kind. But that's not your fault. Did he not like me?" Alexia's throat tightened. "He doesn't know you. If he did, he'd love you. But I love you enough for both of us, okay?" Ava nodded, then hugged her so tight Alexia had to laugh through her tears. That night, she journaled something she hadn't written in years. I'm done grieving the man I thought I married. I'm proud of the woman I became without him. Weeks later, Camille called. Custody case dropped. His team sent a quiet withdrawal. No explanation. Alexia closed her eyes and smiled. That was the explanation. Brandon had watched the world embrace a story he thought would die in silence. And he realized something money couldn't fix. He wasn't needed. That winter, the Hope Room expanded into a second location. By spring, Alexia was flown out to speak at a national literacy summit in Washington, D.C. She wore a simple navy dress and her late mother's necklace. Ava came too, holding her hand the whole walk to the podium. Her speech was titled, "The Baby I Chose, the Life I Built." This time, she didn't cry. She stood tall. She didn't mention Brandon. She didn't have to, because every room she stepped into now carried her story without saying his name. And when she ended with, "I thought choosing my child meant I was losing everything." But Ava was the beginning, not the cost. The room gave her a standing ovation. Ava clapped loudest. As they exited, Camille, Imani, and Dr. Trent stood nearby, 3 women who had shown up when one man walked out. And behind them, a surprise guest waited. Nellie Ellis, older, thinner, a cane in hand. She looked nothing like the woman who once hissed insults in marble hallways. Alexia froze. Nellie stepped forward. "I saw the documentary," she said. "And your speech tonight." Alexia said nothing. Nellie's voice broke. "I was wrong about you, about everything." Still, Alexia didn't respond. Not until Ava stepped beside her and whispered, "Who is that?" Alexia answered plainly, "Someone who didn't see us before." Nellie's lip quivered. "I'm sorry, for not being there, for pushing him to leave you." Alexia nodded, not with forgiveness, but finality. "I don't need an apology to heal, but I hope you find peace." Then she walked away, not because she was angry, but because she had nothing left to prove. She had already won. She had already chosen, and every step forward now belonged only to her and Ava. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the renovated South Shore library, casting a soft glow on the worn but polished hardwood floors. It was the final day of the Women's Literacy Week event, and Alexia stood backstage, one hand lightly gripping her speech notes, the other resting gently on Ava's stroller handle. Ava was fast asleep, her curls wrapped in a pink bonnet, a pacifier bobbing rhythmically with each breath. She was nearly a year old now, curious, expressive, and fearless, a reflection of the woman who had raised her, not the man who had walked away. "Alexia, 5 minutes," Celine whispered, leaning in from the hallway. The documentary team had arrived early, setting up for the final live segment. This one wasn't about the past. It was about the future. Alexia took one long breath. Today wasn't about Brandon. It wasn't about pain. It was about what came after the storm. She stepped onto the modest stage as the room fell quiet. Some in the audience recognized her from the viral documentary. Others were just curious moms, teachers, grandmothers, or young women who had heard about a soft-spoken woman who built something from nothing. A mural painted behind her, read, "The Hope Room, where words become wings." She smiled. "I want to tell you about silence," Alexia began. "The kind you learn to live with when someone you love stops seeing you. When rooms grow quiet, not peaceful, just empty." Heads nodded. A few eyes glistened. "I've been called weak for not fighting harder for my marriage. But the truth is, sometimes silence is strength. Choosing to walk away, to raise your child without confusion, to build your life without apology, that's not weakness. That's choosing peace." Imani sat near the back, arms folded, nodding slowly. Dr. Trent was beside her, dabbing her eyes discreetly. Celine stood with the camera team, recording but barely blinking. Alexia continued, "My daughter doesn't know what her father chose. She doesn't need to, because I chose her. I chose me." Applause broke out, slow, rising, heartfelt. When she left the stage, A woman in her 50s with salt and pepper twists reached for her hand. "My daughter went through something similar," she said. "You gave us language for what we couldn't explain." Later, while packing up Ava's things, Alexia found a note tucked inside the diaper bag. It was on Ellis Innovations stationery. She froze. The handwriting wasn't Brandon's. It was Nellie's. "You might have won their sympathy, but don't confuse attention with value. That child will never be an Ellis." Alexia stared at the words. For a full minute, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she ripped the note into clean strips and dropped them in the trash. That was the last piece of them she'd ever carry. Outside, the city bustled. Ava woke with a yawn, and Alexia lifted her into her arms. "You are enough," she whispered into her daughter's curls. Ava's tiny hand patted her cheek in response. As they walked toward the car, Celine jogged up. "You got a moment?" Alexia smiled. "Always." Celine handed her a letter. "It's from the city council. They're offering a grant, $250,000 for expanding literacy programs in underserved neighborhoods." They saw the documentary. Alexia's eyes widened. "They want the Hope Room, everywhere." Exactly that. For the first time in months, Alexia's throat tightened. Not from grief, but from hope. The journey wasn't over, but she wasn't alone anymore. She had Ava. She had purpose. And now, she had power. Alexia stood near the tall window of the library's reading hall, watching Ava toddle between rows of colorful beanbags. She wore her future reader shirt and clutched a board book tightly. A calm joy settled in Alexia's chest. The auditorium speech had ended. The crowd was gone, but something deeper remained. Her heart was still processing the weight of the last few weeks. The texts from Brandon hadn't stopped. His tone had changed, softer, almost desperate, but his timing was still centered around him. "Can we talk? I think I made the biggest mistake. Ava deserves to know me." But Alexia didn't reply. She wasn't angry anymore. She was clear. She had built this peace with tears and work. It wasn't about punishment. It was about protection. For Ava. For herself. She glanced at the back of the hall, where Imani stood with a clipboard, organizing the next literacy event. Dr. Trent was chatting with parents, and Celine, the filmmaker, was setting up her final camera angle for a quiet goodbye interview. They were all part of the life Alexia built, not by chasing wealth, not by needing validation, but by showing up every day with honesty. She sat down as Celine waved her over. "Ready?" Celine asked. Alexia nodded. The camera started rolling. No lights, no audience, just the hum of children flipping pages in the next room. Celine leaned forward. "Last question. If you could say one thing to the woman who sat in that delivery room alone, what would you tell her?" Alexia didn't hesitate. "I'd tell her she did the right thing, that she wasn't weak for crying or scared for staying quiet, that she protected her daughter the way no one else would. I'd tell her, thank you, for choosing peace over pretending." Celine lowered the camera. "That's your closing shot." Alexia smiled, soft and full. She stood up, walked over to Ava, and scooped her into her arms. The little girl's head fell onto her shoulder instantly. As they walked out into the warm afternoon sun, a black SUV pulled up at the curb. The door opened. Nellie Ellis stepped out. Alexia froze for a moment. Nellie looked tired, older. Her sharp features had softened. Her jewelry was understated. She didn't speak right away. "I saw the documentary," Nellie finally said. "I didn't know everything. I only saw what Brandon let me see." Alexia's voice was steady. "You made your opinions clear, over and over." "I did," Nellie's voice cracked. "And I regret that." Silence fell between them. "I'm not asking to be part of her life," Nellie continued. "I know I've lost that right. But I needed to say, I was wrong. You're the kind of woman I should have welcomed, and the kind of mother every child deserves." Alexia didn't move. Ava stirred, curling tighter into her. After a long beat, Alexia replied, "I don't hold hate in my heart. But this space, it's sacred now. Ava is protected here, not just physically, spiritually, emotionally." "I understand." Nellie nodded. turned slowly, and got back in the car. The SUV drove away. Alexia stood quietly, absorbing the moment, not as victory, not as closure, but as confirmation. She had become a woman who knew her worth, who didn't need apologies to validate her truth. She walked back inside, placed Ava in her stroller, and pulled out her phone. There was another message from Brandon. "I saw Mom went to see you. Please don't shut me out." Alexia stared at the screen. Then she opened her video drafts folder, found the one she recorded. At 2 a.m. last month, titled "For Women Who Were Told to Choose," she uploaded it to her channel with one line in the caption, "For the ones who chose peace over permission." Within minutes, it began to spread, but she wasn't watching the numbers. She was rocking her daughter to sleep. As Ava's breathing slowed and the room dimmed, Alexia looked around their space. The donated, books, the scribbled thank you notes from moms who now had a place to breathe. She had no mansion, no fortune, no press team, but she had dignity. She had love. She had a daughter who would grow up in truth, and no matter what came next, she would face it with open eyes and steady hands, because she wasn't afraid anymore. She had chosen her child. She had chosen herself, and that changed everything. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Have you ever had to choose between your peace and someone else's expectations? Would you have made the same choice as Alexia? Tell us in the comments. Your voice matters. Like this video if you believe in choosing peace over pressure. Share it with someone who needs this reminder. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more powerful stories that inspire healing, strength, and self-worth. Because sometimes, walking away is the strongest move you'll ever make.